Hello, welcome to today's Back to the City, and I am very excited. I'm Simon, and I am very excited to be joined by Sally Linder from Big Salt. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you
It's
so much.
your first interview.
It is my first interview, yes.
But Big Salt is doing really well. You just came off a residency at the White Squirrel. I was reading a nice piece of writing from Dispatch about that, which described the event as essentially a summer block party lineup in a corner bar for free. And it was that last one. You had the Bad Man and another couple of great bands with you. So Big Salt is doing really well, and it's an exciting moment to be connecting with you and celebrating everything the band's doing. The new debut record, One for Your Sister, was released right at the end of last year.
Yeah.
You, of course, are the vocalist in Big Salt. Are you the lyricist too?
Yeah, I write a majority of the songs.
Yeah.
We kind of approach it as there are some songs that we wrote together, or if I got stuck on something, I'd kind of bring it to the band and say, what should we do here? Where are we going? And then, of course, Angie wrote Sporty Dyke. She's the lyricist and wrote the music for that. But yeah.
Excellent. I think that. So yeah, let's begin with that song because there's a celebration of connection and kind of responsivity. I mean, the metaphor of the ball being thrown into my court, that just strikes me as an interesting. If we have that at one end of the spectrum, and then we have metaphors like walking out the door at the other end of the spectrum. There's throughout the record, I feel there is. Sporty Dyke kind of stands out as the one moment, or maybe one of two moments, perhaps On My Mind is another, where we're celebrating playfulness, responsivity, connection, presence, and then there's a lot of recognizing and responding to the absence of all of those things in many of the other songs.
Yeah.
Do you agree, and do you have any initial reflections on that thematic component of the record?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. When we first got together as a group, it was right in the middle of COVID, and even I'd played together before, but when the four of us really came together, I think we were all just really struggling and with various things. It was right in the middle of COVID. We were trying to find a good outlet for some kind of outlet that we could get rid of a lot of the frustrations that we were kind of all having at the time. And when Angie came in to play with us, she sent us her Bandcamp, Bowl Cuts, and Sporty Dyke was on there, and she'd recorded the whole thing herself and played the background, and it was just such, I mean, she is a masterful writer, I think. She's just so talented at it, and it is so easy for her. It just kind of flows out, and she's so funny. And that's why, she just sang about these things where it's kind of dirty, but it's really, it's a love song too, kind of.
Of course it is, yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell that it just really encompasses her whole personality. And so when we were talking about what we wanted to include on the album, she brought to us, I'd love to record this, in a setting and play it out and live. And we're kind of a band that tries to incorporate, bring everybody together. And if anybody has an idea, we take a lot of responsibility and crafting songs as a four-piece. And So we don't have just one singular person who does one thing and then carries out that vision. And so we just felt like that song fits perfectly in the album because Angie's with us. She's
Totally.
our guitar player and our bass player. So
Yeah.
but I do think that there is a kind of a polar opposite maybe of more happier songs and maybe more other songs aren't sad, but they're more defiant.
Yes.
So
Yeah, they're defiant and kind of, I think, kind of boundary setting, addressing the person where the behavior is a stark contrast with the invited behavior in Sporty Dag, and addressing that person and asserting how it's going to be.
yeah, almost like a relationship continuum in a sense. It could be. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I find it. So and that's happening in both Door and One for Your Sister. And we're noticing, so beginning with Door perhaps, noticing someone, there's a lyric about the suit and hat and tie, trying to kind of win the kind of the protagonist over with their charm, but these tricks do not have no power to them, and I think that works really well as an opening track to kind of set the scene, and this character is indicative of other characters that will show up in the records too, and I think there's a defiant response to that character, and then in some of the songs, there's a defiant absence that thankfully he doesn't stick around in every scene. Could you reflect a little bit more on the use of the word defiance?
Yeah, I think when I was thinking about lyrics to both Door and One for Your Sister and Hey Arnie, when we would get together and talk in band practice, especially going through some of the early stages of COVID, one of the running themes was always about we take on a lot of emotional responsibility for things that are happening, whether it's with our families or our boyfriends or girlfriends or husbands or partners. And a lot of times that is exhausting. And a lot of times I think especially when both people are just kind of struggling and to get through, I think more often than not, women take on a lot of that emotional burden and a lot of that everything's got to be okay and let's everything's going to be fine and let's make a nice dinner, or just trying to make sense out of that. And I feel kind of like that those songs a little bit were about giving a character who was putting a lot of emotional work into something and getting very little back in return. And that return was usually just bad sex, or somebody who shows up and just thinks they're going to get by because they look nice or they smell good or they have money. And I feel like that sense comes out a lot in those songs where you're just like, we don't want to do this anymore, and we don't need to do this. And that's kind of, when I listen to those songs now, if I'm kind of feeling run down or on a dark tone or a vibe, those songs just make me feel more empowered a little
Totally.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that collection of 3 songs, Door, Hey Arnie, and One for Your Sister. And I think Hey Arnie in particular, there's some subtlety and nuance to it there. So I don't want no part in screwing you. Yeah, that's the lyric. So we're observing the behavior of Arnie, whoever Arnie is, and this is in one verse taking the form of calling me at 3 a.m. And then later scratching on my door at 4 a.m. An hour. A lot can happen in an hour.
Well, and actually, I recorded when I recorded the vocals for that, I goofed up the 3rd verse. So I repeated the 2nd verse, but the start of the 3rd verse is crawling in my bed at 5 a.m.
Oh.
So I usually can sing it correctly when we perform it live.
Yes.
But yeah, it's kind of this cascade of just like behavior where you're just like, oh God, what are you doing? Like, again, yeah,
right. This is the trajectory that Arnie is on, and we have seen this play out many a time. And even though the verses are going to go 3, 4, 5, there is the song itself, I feel, is creating a new script. The story is not perpetually going to play through those scenes anymore. And there's the same kind of defiance, but there's compassion too. So in the line, I don't want no part in screwing you. So yeah, could you say a little bit more about the combination of qualities in this song, how the defiance and the re-scripting of the drama is slightly different in quality than, say, in Door and One for Your Sister?
Yeah, so Eva and I wrote, she came up with the guitar part for that song at first, kind of before we wrote that song actually a couple years back in the first band that we were in together.
What band was that?
We were in a band together called Hey Darling, and we were mostly a cover band, but Eva and I kind of wanted to do more original work, and then once COVID hit, we kind of all split up, but Eva and I kind of stayed together. And I just loved the groove so much, but I felt like, well, first of all, Arnie is, when we were trying to think of lyrics, but we wanted to kind of come up with a vocal part, we agreed that we would use Eva's dog, Arnie, as a placeholder for words. And so until I kind of could write something more concrete. And then once we kind of really got into the song, we kind of thought, I thought like there's the scary point in a relationship with somebody where you are getting to know them and it becomes clear that maybe they want something from the relationship that you're not interested in, and they become much more persistent and a little aggressive, but you like the person as a person.
Yeah, they're like Arnie scratching on the on the door. It's kind of endearing, but it's also like at odds with one's plan to sleep.
Right, it can be kind of scary and creepy. But there is that feeling of that exasperation of, I like you as a person. Isn't that just enough? And why do we need to continue something that I'm not interested in or you're not interested in? Maybe we can just, not sleep together, but we could be friends.
Totally.
But you have to, I think, too, sometimes when you have to be very careful about how you work that in, and because you want to be kind, but also sometimes hard stops are necessary. And I felt like that was the character in that song was kind of, it's a little bit of placation, and it's a little bit of there's an ill ease, at ease, and kind of trying to work that in, but also wanting to maintain a working relationship.
Yes.
So
yeah, absolutely.
sure.
Yeah. Let's think about. So we've isolated some qualities, kind of in the ethos of the band, and I wonder whether we could dip a little into the connection between these qualities, this defiance mixed with some compassion. It makes me think of Brené Brown saying that the most compassionate people are the most well-boundaried people. And how these, I wonder whether we could think about how those qualities relate to how the band sounds. So we have a mixture of garage rock. I always feel that the English way of saying the American way of saying garage sounds really posh to me. It seems like it should be the other way around.
We're bringing the French back into it. Yeah.
So a mixture of garage rock, and post-punk music, of course. So let's see in this kind of final segment. Could we kind of honor like how it sounds, and whether the kind of like the defiance and the other qualities that we've been recognizing in the lyrics and in the music, how they kind of play out in sonically.
Yeah, the four of us come from very different musical backgrounds. We have, we have varying musical tastes, and we're all very wide in the scope of music that we love to listen to. But one core thing that really holds us all together is that our favorite music that we all love, like PJ Harvey.
Good choice.
Yeah, Kathleen Hanna, vocal styles, like Polystyrene, and just that music that makes us feel something is kind of what we really, that's important to us. And then also being able to perform it in an energetic and exciting way, because none of us particularly want to just be standing up there and look like, oh, we're bored, and we're just here, you're so lucky that we're here. Like we love playing music, and I think that really shows in our when we perform live. We have a lot of energy, but I also think you can tell we all really like each other, and so that style of music, that kind of, one of the things I loved about the Dispatch is they said that we were crunchy, like throwback crunchy, and that's so cool because you like those old, like really in-your-face guitar and bass sounds, and then Milan coming up with heavy bass and drums and kick drum and everything. It just
Titanic drums,
yeah. That's the music that we're drawn to, that we get a lot, all of us get energy from. And so I think it would be really hard for us to do something that was more maybe on the chiller side, or like less, maybe more pretty, or less like that. So it just seems like it comes naturally with what we want to hear and what we like to go out and hear.
Yeah.
And what moves us.
Yes, some of the there was some moments in the vocals where qualities that I really like about Kathleen Hanna were very present. What is your musical background?
So, well, I'm a classically trained pianist. I'm a Suzuki student, and so I took all through my younger years through college, and then, but my dad was always in bands before I was born, growing up, and then later he's still in a band actually right now, and so I would go to a lot of his shows and watch and got to know a lot of the local musicians, and just kind of absorbed a lot of that, just that free energy, kind of great cosmic bubble, like my dad likes to call it.
Which band is he presently in?
He's, well, my dad's a little older. He's now in a band called Above Ground. So, and I'm originally from Iowa.
Yes.
And so he's, so they're in Iowa, but he's played ever since, well, when he got back from, I think, another way of how music, you can really, how music is so vital to existence for many people. When he got back from Vietnam, he just started playing guitar and was always interested. He started playing in high school too, but that was very healing for him. And so he's played for over 50 years in various bands. And so I'd always kind of, he and I would work on things. He'd always, he didn't quite understand classical music, where that's one of my favorite types of music, and so we'd work on stuff. But I didn't really start singing until I met Eva, actually, and we started working
in the last
together.
Few years then? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's she kind of really gave me a lot of confidence to actually do it.
Yeah, yeah. There is. I think your vocal delivery is so confident and controlled, and there is a great balance of that, and then the kind of obviously the punky, the kind of letting go, but it is very confident and controlled. At what stage did you did you realize that you were to be the vocalist in this band?
Yeah, well, when I met Eva and our old bass player, the three of us
in Hello Darling,
in Hey Darling,
Hey Darling, yeah.
We just met and started to work on music. I think one of the threads that kind of goes through a lot of these bands, like when I first met Eva and Yo, who's our old bass player, we were all really going through rough times and wanted an outlet that was not drinking, or something that was positive. And I thought, it turned out actually Yo just put out an ad in Craigslist and was like, I'm looking for a couple other women to play with. And I was kind of thinking, like, I love to sing. I'm not terrible at it. I don't know how great I could be, but let's try it. And we met, and they both really helped me to say, you can do this, and you can do more than just like, you want to sit, you don't need to just do acoustic quiet things, you can do whatever you want. And so then after Hey Darling kind of broke up, and Eva and I were really thinking about where do we want to go and how do we want to do this. By that time we met Milan, and she was just very supportive too, and very much like, we could rock this, we could, let's create a whole sound around, the vocal styling, but also the drumming and Eva's guitars, and it just kind of really fell together very seamlessly, basically. So
yeah, how did Milan and Angie show up?
Well, during COVID, we lost our bass player and our old drummer for Hey Darling, and we kind of wanted to have a fresh start. And so we just reached out to some of the groups that we're in to see who was available to play and what kind of stuff they wanted to play. And Milan immediately answered. It was in a Facebook group, and Milan immediately answered and was like, I might be interested. And she showed up, and she was, the funny thing about it is that all of us, Milan and Eva and I, were relatively new to playing in bands and playing out in music. Angie's been doing it for years, over a decade. But and so we talk about it now because Milan talked about like how she was very nervous when she first came, and she just was great. She just showed up, and she was, I mean, she's just this very charismatic,
Absolutely.
Fun person to be around. And she was just like, I'm relatively new, but let's play around. And she was very comfortable, and
Yes.
it all kind of really flowed well.
I met Milan through the context of the Black Widows originally.
Yeah.
It's so good to see Milan like being a central figure in this band.
Yeah, she's definitely got the chops. I mean, both vocally, she did some backup vocal work on One for Your Sister too. But she can sing and play drums, and has that breath work down, which is amazing. Because I just watch her and I'm just like, you know. But
it's tricky. Yeah.
It is tricky, yeah. But she just rocks it, and but she's also very, I think we all are, we kind of are able to, all of us are willing to just admit, like, I don't really have all the answers, but let's work on something together, and it's a group effort. And she was very much like that. And I think that's what definitely drew me to her, was that she wanted to be a team player. And that was important, I think, to both Eva and I a lot. And then Angie is kind of the same thing. We found her 6 months after Milan joined, and she was interested in playing with us, and she showed up, and she's a guitar player, but then we needed a bass player, and she's like, I love bass, I can play bass. And it turns out like she kills on guitar, but she's just like this in the pocket bass player too, and writes these great bass lines, and is so fun to play with because she's so animated and fun and energetic. And we really just all kind of came together and all vibed on the same level of, we're here to get our work done, let's plow through it, this is how we want to present ourselves, and let's just have fun. We've got a lot of plans for the fall, and it'll be interesting to see what
Very
happens.
exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to witnessing and responding to whatever happens.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was great to be here
Yeah.
about this stuff.
You're very welcome.